Hello, my name is Emily, and I'm here today with the nationally recognized authority and trust clause litigation, Dan Dalton. How are you doing today, Dan?
Hey, Emily, I'm doing great. The Detroit Lions are first in our division, and we're just kind of cruising along. So couldn't be happier. Except my fantasy football league is totally corrupt and illegal and wrong, which means I'm in last place. But other than that, I'm doing great.
Well, we've got those Lions to be excited about.
We
So
got the Lions and Michigan. That's true.
exactly. So Dan, it's been a few months since you provided an update on the UMC Church. So what's new?
Well, I think the big lead is the amount of disaffiliations. As of October 23rd, 2023, which is when we're recording this, 6,572 churches have disaffiliated. It's just so many more churches than anybody really anticipated throughout this whole process. So there's still a couple more, conferences to go. There's Western North Carolina's coming up, and they have over 100, and a couple other ones coming up as well this fall. I know Michigan is coming up as well. So uh, we're seeing more and more churches disaffiliate, and much more than I think anybody anticipated. So it's exciting.
What's happening on the litigation front?
That has very much increased. I think the last time, or maybe the time before, when I gave a quarterly update, I predicted there'd be an increase in litigation, and there really has been. We're currently litigating in Maine and in Massachusetts, in Alabama, and of course Arkansas, and a couple other places as well. What we found is that there's a number of churches still that are not aware that there was a pathway out or is a pathway out under 2553 of the Book of Discipline. The time has passed, or they've missed the opportunity to leave, or they've more likely is they've listened to their pastor or district superintendent, and who's told them that they can get out later, and have now come to realize they really can't. And it's unfortunate, but we're seeing more litigation. We're seeing more conferences putting up roadblocks, just really putting the screws to a lot of churches, and that's that's the latest trend. And I think that'll just increase this last quarter and of 2023, and especially next year. It's exactly what happened in the Presbyterian Church USA litigations, and it's going to go on for probably another 2 or 3 years.
So Dan, how are local churches still in the UMC coping?
Well, it depends who you are. Some progressive churches are doing great. They're very excited that their arch enemies are gone, and they're happy to see them leave. They're happy at their annual conferences that they don't have to deal with people they disagree with. If you have the centrists, they're very unhappy right now because they've realized that the idea of staying together as one big family is just really just doesn't work, and it's not going to work. And they see themselves being pushed out of leadership positions in annual conferences, and the newly elected bishops. There's really nobody centrist as well. There's nobody really kind of towing the line of let's make this a global church. It's really kind of everything in the United States is moving to becoming a very progressive denomination. You have traditionalists who are stuck in some conferences. Desert Southwest, for example, is one. You'll see that there's been no disaffiliations this year simply because they can't. I mean, we've been working with one church who is going down the road of disaffiliation, and their first cost to leave was 2.1 million, and they kind of were scraping the money together. And when they told the district superintendent they're ready to go, they said, "Oh, they made a math error, and now it's 3.9 million." So they're stuck, and there's a lot of churches, especially in the Western United States, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, a number in Arizona as well, New Mexico. They're just stuck. They just can't get out and keep their property. So they're looking at other alternative plans as well. And you have Alabama and West Florida, who's very much changed the rules to make sure that no more churches can disaffiliate. And there's a group going out at the next annual conference there, but those are generally smaller churches. The larger churches there's been about 80 of them that want to leave, have been blocked by the conference. So depending where you're at and who you're supporting, you're doing well. If you're kind of traditional and you want out, it's kind of it's a tough road, to be honest with you, right now.
How have disaffiliations impacted the conferences?
Well, I think they've impacted them both from a financial standpoint and from just a strategic standpoint. Let me talk strategic. There's a whole idea now of this regionalization where at the next annual conference, or next general conference, I should say, in 2024, there's a plan to basically make all conferences their own Methodist entities. So they'll all have their own book of disciplines, the whole 9 yards, but they'll be kind of connected, I guess, as United Methodist. And this whole idea is to allow the United States to really become even more progressive than what it is right now. But they're finding that you need 2/3 votes of the general conference delegates to do that, and they just don't have the votes to do that at this point in time. So you have a bunch of progressives that are just really, really discouraged right now on that particular point. And the idea now is to block the people even from coming to the general conference. So, for example, in Africa, you have to go through a visa process that's pretty extensive. That involves an interview and then coming over. And in order to get the interview, you have to release the name and where you're going, the conference, the whole 9 yards to the local government, and it's just not happening. So it's really kind of slowing that down, and it's intentional on part of the progressive delegates. So, there's still this internal tension going on right now within the United Methodist Church on that point, in the hopes that there individuals who are more conservative that are still in the United Methodist Church that are outside of the United States won't be able to vote to leave. Financially, you're seeing an incredible drop. Annual conferences. Let me give you an example. Arkansas has an annual budget of 2023 of $7 million. Last week, they sent out a email saying that they need to cut $2.5 million from that $7 million budget. They've also decided to change their apportionments. And again, we've been warning local churches for about 3 or 4 years now is it's going to come because this funding gap is going to exist. Money's got to come in somehow. So local churches are going to pay a lot more in apportionments in Arkansas now that remain in the United Methodist Church. So you have funding budget gaps, you have rising apportionments, you have dissension within the denomination itself, and it's really affecting things, and it's going to take a while for this to shake out. I mean, again, in the Presbyterian USA world, it took about maybe 10 years to get to a point where they're at. In the Episcopal Church, it took about 10 years to get where they're at. You're going to lose a lot more members and a lot more churches, but it'll probably bottom out maybe 10 years from now. That would be my guess.
So Dan, can you talk a little bit about what is happening with the talks with the Episcopal Church?
Sure. So what's really interesting is prior to 2020, Bishop Palmer out of Ohio was in talks. He was really leading the talks with the Episcopal Church of the United States to have a full communion, and eventually to kind of see where resources could work together. Full communion is basically sharing pastors and sharing space. That's the kind of idea of that. So if you have a town where there's an Episcopal church, you can have a Methodist service there. Or vice versa. If there's a town where you have a Methodist church, Episcopals could come and worship in that place as well. And the priests and the pastors would be interchangeable. And you'd still have your Book of Common Prayer and your high church kind of elements in the Episcopal world. In the Methodist world, you still have your Book of Discipline and your Wesley hymns, for example. And it's kind of merging the two. Those talks accelerated during COVID, and also what's kind of precipitated the last couple of years is just a dramatic drop of attendance in the Episcopal Church. And I'm using the word attendance as opposed to membership because members, the number of members is just a number that really can't be verified. but attendance is people who actually come and donate. So now we have in the United States, it's dropped to about 300,000 plus or minus people who regularly attend the Episcopal Church, which is just a huge drop throughout the United States. However, they have a huge cash reserve, and they have a mechanism to pay for the church, which is Trinity Church Foundation in Lower Manhattan. Trinity Church owns about 140 acres in Lower Manhattan, including the World Trade Center site, that they lease out to property owners, and that's where they get their income out of. So that's going to be a continued source of income for them. And on top of that, they have just tremendous endowments where you had wealthy families from the early 1900s that were part of the Episcopal Church, and these endowments continue to flow. So the money is going to continue to flow at the Episcopal Church, but the people are continuing to dwindle. On the other hand, you have the United Methodist Church. In the United Methodist Church, you have a greater number of people. There's a little more than 1 million, 2, 3 that attend on a weekly basis as of 2022, according to UM data. You have that'll probably drop to under 1 million, I would guess, after all the disaffiliations are done in 2023. So I'm going to guess, say about 800,000 or so. And then you're going to have a lot of real estate that's left, but there's no asset there that's going to pay for those churches to continue on. They'll sell real estate, and there'll be a small fix, but there's nothing like an endowment or a Trinity church land that the United Methodist Church has, because the United Methodist Church is not a legal entity, and so you have these annual conferences, and some have money and a lot don't, and so we're going to see a lot of shrinkage. So these talks have accelerated over time of a general merger of the two. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure it'll continue on with those discussions. I'm sure there's been discussions with other denominations as well to keep these general old mainline denominations in place, and some will work and some won't work. But I think we're going to see that happening. But what's critical, I think, for Methodist churches, whether you're centrist or whether you're progressive or even traditionalists who are stuck in the denomination, is that the Episcopal Church is the Dennis Canon, and the Dennis Canon was enacted by the denomination in the 1980s, right after a case called Jones versus Wolf was decided. And there's a lot of courts that have upheld the Dennis Canon and affirmed it. Many more courts have affirmed it, more than the Methodist trust clause. So you just have to kind of watch out for that moving forward. If it's coming down the track and you're seeing it happening, there are steps that you can take as a local church to preserve and protect your property. But it's just something to kind of keep in mind for that eventuality, because it's probably going to happen.
So Dan, what's going on with the Global Methodist Church?
Well, I think they're going through some growing pains right now, and they're still figuring things out. There's a convening conference next year in Costa Rica, and the idea being is that it'll be easier for people to get to, and quite frankly, it is easier to get Costa Rica through visas than through the United States. So that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot cheaper to go through a conference there as well. So that will save some money. So that's kind of an interesting development. You have local conferences that are being formed right now, or they call them provisional conferences throughout the United States. You have ordinations that is occurring as well. So they're kind of figuring things out that way, in terms of a structure. The structure is very similar to the United Methodist Church. So, if you're a big fan of the United Methodist Church, you're probably going to like the Global Methodist Church the way it functions. And conversely, if you're not a big fan of the United Methodist Church, then you're probably not going to like the way the governance is being structured in the Global Methodist Church. It's kind of the same people, just you have the Methodist bishops are now Global Methodist bishops. Methodist leaders are now Global Methodist leaders, just kind of moved into a different role, but they're still functioning very similar to how they function in the United Methodist Church that way. About half the churches that have left, about a little more than 3,000, have joined the Global Methodist Church. we'll probably see that number increase in the next year or so, and then we'll see where things go from there. I think the Global Methodist Church is a little surprised that more churches haven't joined them. There's a number of churches that have left the United Methodist Church and have either remained non-denominational or evangelical, or may have joined another denomination. There's a few that have done that. But I think a lot of, especially the larger churches, have looked out and seen, well, what have we gotten out of the United Methodist Church, and why didn't we like that? And what do we expect from the Global Methodist Church, for example, and why would we want to put ourselves back in that position? And that's not a commentary, for me. It's just what, churches are saying. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. And financially too, it's a voluntary kind of tithe to the annual conference in your Global Methodist Church, and then to the general Global Methodist Church as well. And so it's just going to see financially, it'll be interesting to see how that works as well, because if there's nothing kind of forcing people to pay anything, I'm really curious to see how that works out with the whole voluntary tithe thing. So we'll see. We'll definitely see. But they're up and running. They're getting organized. They're growing. They're doing things that they're making sure that they're trying to make sure that they're not part of the United Methodist Church structure, even though they're kind of like fitting themselves into that structure, or creating that structure. So I'll be very curious to see how that works out in the next couple of years.
Do you have any final thoughts, Dan, before we end the video?
Yeah. First, don't join a fantasy football league if the requirement is when your quarterback goes down, you have to take the backup quarterback on the same team, because that's totally unfair.
Well, great advice.
We all agree on that. Okay. Second is that this is not an end for churches, especially traditional churches or centrist churches, or even progressive churches, who feel like they're stuck. We're in the end of October right now, and of 2023. There's 2 months left. You're probably too late right now to get onto an annual conference schedule to get out on 2553. But there's other ways to move out, and I would really encourage you to talk with us to think through those things. There are some conferences, for example, that are using 2549(3)(b), the exigent circumstances, to allow churches to leave, and using the same formula to pay as you would pay under 2553. So it's just an example. Not every conference is doing that, but there are some that are doing that. But don't be discouraged that you've missed this boat, or you've realized that your pastor or district superintendent was not entirely truthful with you about another pathway out by general conference in 2024 or any other means. There is no pending legislation at this point in time that I'm aware of that would extend 2553 to leave. There may be, we'll see, but at this point in time, we're not really. We kind of try to keep our finger on the pulse of that, and we haven't really seen any traction or any proposals that would really going to get traction to get a vote at the general conference. So have some hope. Stay at it. We can certainly help, and I think the next step unfortunately is going to be a lot of litigation, and that's probably where this is going to end for the next couple of years. So we'll keep you posted. About once a quarter, we'll post these. We get a lot of good comments and feedback, and if you have any questions, send us a note and let us know. I'd be happy to write a blog or to do another video on those topics as well.
Well, as always, thank you for your insight, Dan. And if your church is interested in having or learning more information or hiring our firm, please reach out to our office at 313-859-6000 or email us today. Thank you.